He used to call me his comfort when no one was watching, and a mistake when everyone was around. Funny, isn't it? How love can sound so sweet in whispers, yet sting like poison in daylight. My name is Lena, and once upon a time, I believed love could conquer anything, even lies, even shame, even the cruel hierarchy of a family that never saw me as worthy. I remember the day I fell for Ethan Crawford, the golden boy of the Crawford Empire. He was charming, brilliant, and spoke with that quiet intensity that made every word sound like a promise. To a naive woman like me, promises were enough to build dreams. I worked as a financial strategist in his company. Ethan was my superior, my mentor, and eventually, my world. He wasn't supposed to look at me that way, but he did. And when he finally confessed, one late evening, his voice trembling, his eyes soft under the office light, I believed every word. He told me, "Lena, I'll make you my wife when everything settles. Just trust me for now." I did. I trusted him more than I trusted myself. But everything settling never came. Instead, the world woke up one morning to headlines that shattered me. Crawford Group CEO marries his adopted sister, Celine Crawford. At first I thought it was a cruel mistake, a misunderstanding. He'd explain, he'd call, he'd say something, anything. But days turned into silence, and silence turned into humiliation. When he finally came, his explanation broke whatever was left of me. He said it was for the family's stability, that Celine's inheritance needed protection, and that their marriage was only on paper. Only on paper. Those 3 words became my cage. I became his secret, hidden behind the grand mansion walls, living in the shadows of his public life. I'd hear their laughter echo through the halls, the clinking of their champagne glasses, while I waited in his study, pretending I didn't exist. He always came to me after. When the house went quiet, when she was asleep, when the guilt in his eyes mixed with desire he couldn't suppress, and I let him, because I thought love was sacrifice. I thought patience would earn me a place beside him. One night, I overheard Celine whispering to him, "You'll never get rid of her, will you? She's like a ghost that doesn't know she's dead." He didn't deny it. He just sighed and said, "Don't worry, she won't cause trouble." And he was right. I didn't. I swallowed every humiliation like bitter medicine, convincing myself that someday he'd choose me. But the universe doesn't bless a love built on secrets. It punishes it. It was Celine who destroyed me in the end. She accused me of embezzlement, a crime I didn't commit. Evidence appeared from nowhere. The board turned against me. The media feasted on my name, and Ethan, he didn't defend me. He stood beside her in front of the cameras and said coldly, "This woman betrayed our trust." That woman, me. In a moment of despair, I confronted him in his office, trembling, desperate. "Ethan, look at me. Please tell me this isn't what you wanted. Tell me this isn't the man I loved." His reply came like winter. "You were never supposed to exist in public, Lena. You knew that. You knew your place. My place." I left that night with nothing but a broken heart, and the taste of betrayal burned into my soul. The headlines screamed my downfall. My parents disowned me in shame, and the world moved on. A month later, I heard he and Celine renewed their vows on the beach, where he once promised me forever. That was the last memory I took with me. Before the crash, a heavy rainstorm, my car sliding off the road, the headlights fading, his voice echoing in my head, "You knew your place." As darkness swallowed me, I whispered one last thought. If there's a next life, I'll never beg for love again. Then, nothing. No pain. No sound. Just silence. Until a gasp. A rush of air. The familiar scent of coffee. The faint sound of morning birds. I opened my eyes. I was back. Back in my old apartment. Before the affair. Before the scandal. Years before everything fell apart. On the table lay my phone, glowing with a message. Ethan Crawford. Lena, let's meet tonight. I have something important to ask you. My heart froze. This was the day he first proposed to me. But this time, the trembling girl who would have said yes wasn't there anymore. This time, I smiled faintly at the message and deleted it. I whispered to myself, "You had your chance. Ethan, not in this life." When I woke up in my old apartment that morning, sunlight streamed through the same thin curtains I once thought too dull for my taste. Back then, I dreamed of silk drapes, penthouse windows, and a life beside Ethan Crawford. Now, all I felt was gratitude for those plain cotton curtains, because they were mine. The world hadn't yet broken me, not this time. I sat there for a long moment, my heart beat loud in the silence. My fingers trembled as I picked up the phone again, reading the words that once changed my life. Ethan Crawford. Lena, let's meet tonight. I have something important to ask you. The old me would have spent hours choosing a dress, rehearsing what to say, imagining the moment he'd kneel with a ring. But the woman sitting there now, the one who had already lived the end of that fairy tale, knew better. Not this time. I whispered, my voice calm, steady, like someone who had already seen the ending to a movie everyone else thought was new. I spent the next few days testing the world around me. The dates matched perfectly. The year, the calendar. My workplace still had my name on the intern roster. My parents were still alive. Everything was as it had been. Except me. This was my second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it crying over a man who sold love for convenience. At first, I wasn't sure what to do. The urge to see him, to confirm it was real, kept tugging at me. But I stopped myself every time, because I knew what seeing him would do. It would wake up the weakness I'd buried with my death. So instead, I turned inward. I started rewriting my plans, both literally and metaphorically. I spent nights researching the Crawford Group, tracing their upcoming investments, memorizing every corporate move that once crushed me. I still remembered every betrayal, every setup, every name Celine had used to destroy me. This time, I wouldn't be the naive woman who waited for justice. This time, I'd be prepared. A week later, fate decided to test me. I ran into Ethan. It was at a charity luncheon organized by his family. He was surrounded by businessmen, his charm untouched, his smile still that same heart-stealing curve. The old Lena would have melted. The reborn Lena simply watched from across the hall, expressionless. He noticed me. Of course he did. He excused himself from the crowd and walked toward me with that familiar confidence. Shoulders squared, voice smooth like velvet. "Lena," he said, smiling. "I didn't expect to see you here. You look different. He couldn't see the fire behind my calm. He couldn't feel the silence where my old affection used to be. I gave him a polite smile. People change when they stop waiting. He frowned, clearly not understanding. "Are you avoiding me?" I laughed softly. "No, Ethan. I'm avoiding the version of myself that believed you." His expression froze for a second. Before he could reply, someone called his name. Celine. There she was, just as beautiful and poisonous as I remembered. Younger, untainted by the arrogance she'd later wear like perfume. She clung to his arm, smiling sweetly. "Brother, they're waiting for you. Brother." The word sent a chill through me, even though I already knew how that would end. Ethan turned slightly toward her, then back to me. "We'll talk later." I nodded. "No, Ethan, we won't." And I walked away. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. That night, as I sat in my small apartment, sipping tea by the window, I realized something profound. I used to think rebirth meant revenge, but as I stared at the city lights, I understood. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about freedom. Freedom from needing to be chosen. Freedom from being someone's secret. Freedom from the version of me that died for a man who couldn't even defend my name. Days turned into weeks. I poured my energy into work, studying, improving, preparing. Every document I read, every presentation I gave, felt like another step toward independence. But fate wasn't done surprising me. One afternoon, while delivering financial reports to a potential investor, I met him, Adrian Vaughn. He wasn't like Ethan. Where Ethan commanded the room, Adrian listened to it. Where Ethan's eyes were sharp and calculating, Adrian's were calm and observant, like he saw things people didn't say out loud. He extended his hand with a small smile. "You're Ms. Lena Park, right? I've heard good things about your work." I shook his hand cautiously. "That depends on who's been talking," he chuckled. "People who seem a little intimidated by you, actually." That made me laugh for the first time in a long while. There was something disarming about him. Gentle but firm, kind but not naive. For a brief second, I felt warmth instead of ache. It scared me, because the last time I felt warmth, it burned me alive. Later that night, as I returned home, I found a message waiting on my phone again. This time not from Ethan, but from Celine. "We should talk, Lena. I know you're still close to my brother." I stared at the text, my chest tightening with ironic amusement. Close to her brother, if only she knew how close. But that was the past, and I had no intention of letting history repeat itself. I deleted her message too. Standing in front of the mirror, I met my reflection. Same face, same eyes, but a completely different woman staring back. I was reborn, I whispered, but not to fix them, to fix me. And as I said it, I meant it, because this time, I wasn't going to wait for Ethan Crawford to destroy me again. I was going to destroy the illusion that he ever mattered. And maybe, just maybe, I'd learn what real love felt like, without begging for it. Sometimes, silence is louder than words, and my silence began to disturb Ethan Crawford. It started with the little things, the unanswered calls, the polite distance, the calm refusal to look impressed by his presence. Before, I would have jumped at every chance to see him. Now, I treated him like a stranger who happened to share the same air, and nothing unsettled a man like Ethan more than indifference. Weeks after that charity luncheon, fate, or perhaps karma, brought us face to face again. The Crawford Group had just announced a new partnership proposal, and my company was one of the bidders. He walked into the conference room with the same confident stride I remembered so well, flanked by executives and cameras flashing. His smile was rehearsed perfection, but when his eyes met mine across the table, the mask faltered for a second. I didn't avert my gaze. Not this time. Instead, I offered a small professional smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. Crawford." He froze. "Mr. Crawford, that's new. It's appropriate, isn't it?" I said lightly, flipping through the presentation notes. "We're business competitors today." He chuckled, but the sound didn't reach his eyes. "Since when do you draw lines between us, Lena?" Since the last time I crossed them and got burned, the room went silent. His assistant shifted uncomfortably. I could feel his eyes on me for the rest of the meeting, heavy with questions he couldn't voice. But the truth was simple. He was no longer my universe. He was just a memory, dressed in an expensive suit. When the meeting ended, I gathered my papers and stood. He called out softly, "Wait!" I turned. He walked closer, lowering his voice. "You've changed." "I had to," I replied. The old me didn't survive. There was something in his eyes then. Confusion, regret, maybe even fear. But I didn't stay to analyze it. I just smiled politely and left the room, my heels echoing with the quiet confidence of a woman who no longer needed validation. Outside the conference hall, I bumped into Adrian Vaughn again. He was leaning against the marble pillar, scrolling through his phone. When he saw me, he smiled that gentle smile that had already begun to feel dangerously comforting. "Impressive presentation," he said. "You made them all nervous, including Crawford." I smiled faintly. "That wasn't my goal." "Maybe not," he said. "But it's good to see someone make him sweat for once." I laughed. Softly. Sincerely. It felt strange to laugh without pain behind it. He tilted his head, studying me. "You look like someone who's finally breathing after a long time underwater." That stopped me. How could he see that? How could a man who barely knew me read what Ethan never could? "Maybe," I said quietly. "I just decided I'm done drowning for people who don't know how to swim." Adrian smiled knowingly. "Then maybe it's time you learned how to float instead." I didn't answer, but his words lingered long after he walked away. In the following weeks, Ethan tried to reach me again. First, through work, then through friends, and finally, directly, showing up at my office, unannounced. "Lena, you're avoiding me," he said, stepping into my space as if he still had that right. I leaned back in my chair, calm, composed. "Ethan, I'm working. You should go." He frowned. "You used to love when I came to see you." I looked him dead in the eyes. That was when I didn't know how much self-respect was worth. He blinked, clearly not expecting the sting in my tone. "You're being cold," he murmured. "That's not the Lena I knew. The Lena you knew," I said softly, "was in love with an illusion. She died the moment you chose convenience over truth." He looked shaken, and for a brief moment, I almost saw regret flicker across his face. But regret doesn't erase betrayal. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. "Don't," I said. "Whatever we were, it ended before it began." He whispered, almost pleading, "Celine doesn't mean anything." And that was when I laughed. Not bitterly, not painfully, just tiredly. "Please, Ethan, don't insult me with half-truths. You made your choice, remember. You said I knew my place." His face paled. He remembered those words. He should. They were the last he said to me before I died. After he left, I sat by the window, the city lights blurring into soft streaks. My chest ached, but it wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was healing, the dull, aching kind that tells you you're slowly learning to live again. That night, I received a text from Adrian. Still alive after battling the famous Crawford. I smiled. "Barely, but I won." He replied a minute later. "You always will." The next morning, I saw a headline. "Rumors swirl about Ethan Crawford's relationship with adopted sister Celine." History was beginning to repeat itself. But this time, I wasn't going to be dragged into the storm. I'd watch from afar, silent, composed, untouchable, still. A small part of me couldn't help but feel pity, not for Celine, not even for Ethan, but for the woman I used to be, the one who thought love was measured by how much you could endure. I closed my laptop, exhaled deeply, and whispered to my reflection, "You're different now, Lena. Don't look back." And for the first time in both my lives, I meant it. Love used to feel like walking barefoot on glass. Painful, beautiful, and impossible to stop. But this time, I was learning that love could also feel like sunlight. Quiet, warm, and patient. It began with small gestures. Adrian Vaughn had a way of appearing exactly when the world felt too heavy. He never intruded, never demanded, just showed up. Once, after a particularly long day of work, I found a cup of black coffee waiting on my desk, still warm. The note beside it said, "Thought you might need a little strength today." AV, another time, he stopped by my office just to drop off a file, yet somehow ended up helping me fix my broken pen. He laughed, saying, "You'd think a woman who can outsmart half the finance board wouldn't lose to a pen spring." I laughed too, really laughed. It was such a foreign sound to my own ears that I froze for a moment. He looked at me gently. "It's nice to see you smile without pretending." Those words sank deep. Because he was right, I had forgotten what it felt like to smile freely. Meanwhile, Ethan's presence was becoming Desperate, he started calling again, sending flowers I never accepted, showing up at events he never used to attend. Every time our eyes met, I could feel the regret bleeding through his perfect composure. One afternoon, during a corporate conference, I caught him standing alone near the balcony, staring at me. The wind was cold, the sky grey, and there he was, looking like a man haunted by his own choices. When I walked past, he spoke softly. "Lena, can we talk?" I didn't stop walking. "About what, Ethan? The past?" I left it there. He reached for my wrist, his grip firm, almost desperate. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." I turned, eyes sharp. "Then how is it supposed to be, me hidden behind closed doors, while you played husband to your sister? You made your decision. Now live with it." His voice broke slightly. "You think I don't regret it? I don't care if you do," I said quietly. "Because regret isn't love, Ethan. It's just guilt wearing perfume." I left before he could say another word. From the corner of the hall, I caught sight of Celine watching us, her smile brittle, her knuckles white. The woman who once destroyed me was finally afraid. The next few weeks felt lighter. I began collaborating more closely with Adrian's firm. We spent long hours discussing business strategies, but our conversations often drifted into deeper things: life, regrets, and second chances. He told me once, "Everyone thinks success comes from ambition, but most of the time it comes from pain." I asked, "So what was your pain?" He smiled sadly. "Losing someone I never had the courage to fight for." Our eyes met, and something unspoken passed between us. Not urgency, not obsession, just quiet recognition. Two broken hearts acknowledging each other's scars. That night, as we left the office, he walked me to my car. The air was cool, the city humming softly around us. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "You know, Lena, you don't have to keep proving you're strong. It's okay to rest too." I looked at him, truly looked at him. The steadiness in his gaze, the sincerity in his tone. Ethan's love had always demanded sacrifice. Adrian's asked for nothing, and that was when I realized how dangerous gentleness could be, because it makes you want to trust again. A week later, the inevitable happened. Celine showed up at my office. She looked flawless as ever, hair perfectly styled, lips painted red, but her eyes carried something darker. "Still chasing men above your league, Lena," she sneered. I leaned back in my chair, unbothered. "I don't chase anymore. I attract what belongs to me." Her smile faltered. "Stay away from my brother." I raised an eyebrow. "Your brother? You mean your husband?" Her face went pale. I stood, walking slowly toward her. "You can't hide forever, Celine. The truth has a way of leaking through perfect lies," she scoffed. "You think anyone would believe you?" I smiled faintly. "I don't need them to. You'll destroy yourself without my help." And I meant it. Because the first time around I had fought, begged, cried, and lost everything. This time I was silent. And silence was deadlier. Later that evening, as I sat in a cafe, sipping coffee and trying to shake off the tension, I heard a familiar voice. Rough day. It was Adrian. He sat across from me, without waiting for permission, a knowing smile on his face. "Something like that," I admitted. He leaned forward, his voice soft. "You don't have to tell me. Just let me sit here with you." We didn't talk much after that. Just sat there. Two souls finding comfort in the quiet company of someone who understood. Outside, the city glowed under the setting sun, and for a moment, I felt peace. A kind I never thought I'd feel again. But peace never lasts long in a world built on secrets. The very next morning, the news broke like thunder. Crawford Group scandal. Marriage between CEO Ethan Crawford and adopted sister under legal scrutiny. I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold in my hands. History had finally begun to unravel itself, just as it once did. But this time, I wasn't the one drowning in it. This time, I was the one watching the storm from solid ground. I closed my laptop and whispered to myself, let the truth do what I never needed to. And for the first time since my rebirth, I smiled, not with pain but with peace. Because this wasn't revenge. This was justice. Quiet, patient, and poetic. And somewhere in that justice, love was quietly blooming. They say when the truth surfaces, it doesn't come quietly. It crashes, destroys, and rebuilds everything in its path. And that's exactly what happened. The morning after the scandal broke, the city's headlines were ruthless. Crawford Group faces allegations of fraudulent marriage. Adopted sister or secret lover. Ethan Crawford's empire on the brink. Every word was like a knife, aimed straight at Ethan and Celine's carefully built illusion. I sat in my office, reading each headline, not with glee, but with a strange calmness. I had no hand in the exposure. I didn't need to. Truth had its own timing, and this time it was beautifully punctual. When I looked out my office window, the city below looked the same, but I wasn't. I wasn't the desperate woman who once begged for love. I wasn't the broken one they pitied. I was the one who survived them. That afternoon, Adrian walked into my office, holding 2 coffees, and that same unshakable calm. "Congratulations," he said with a teasing smile. I frowned slightly. For what? For looking at chaos and somehow making it look like art. I couldn't help but laugh softly. "You think I did this?" He shrugged. "Maybe not directly, but sometimes. Life fights for the people who've already stopped fighting." His words lingered in the air. He always had a way of saying things that reached places I didn't even know were still wounded. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashing repeatedly. I ignored it once, twice, 3 times, but it didn't stop. Finally, I answered. "Lena, it's me." Ethan's voice, just the sound of it sent a chill through me. Not fear, not longing, but memory. "What do you want, Ethan? Please, can we meet? Just once. I need to explain everything." I closed my eyes, leaning back in my chair. "There's nothing left to explain." He sounded almost broken. "You don't understand. I didn't know. Celine, she..." I cut him off. "No, Ethan, you did know. You just didn't care until the world started watching." Silence followed. Then quietly, he said, "Please, just give me 10 minutes. You owe me that much." I almost laughed. "You think I owe you? After everything?" There was a pause. Then, in a voice that almost trembled, he said, "No, you don't owe me anything. But I owe you the truth. I didn't agree, but part of me, the part that wanted closure, not revenge, decided to listen. We met that evening at the same hotel lounge where he once told me he was sorry while holding Celine's hand. This time, the room felt colder. He looked nothing like the confident CEO the world admired. His hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and his eyes carried guilt deep enough to drown in. "Lena," he began softly. "Everything they said, it's true. Celine and I were never real siblings. My parents adopted her for publicity, and over time things became complicated. I stayed silent, letting him speak. She used my father's will to trap me. If I refused to marry her, the board would have destroyed my career. I thought I was protecting everything my father built, but I lost everything instead." He looked at me, desperate. "You were the only real thing I ever had. My heart should have felt something. Pity maybe, but it didn't. It was quiet, peaceful even. Ethan," I said finally, "do you hear yourself? You were protecting your career. I was protecting your heart, and you threw me away for convenience." His voice cracked. "I was scared. So was I snapped. "But I still chose love. You chose ambition. Don't come to me now because you lost what you traded me for." He reached across the table, his hand trembling. "Lena, I still love you." I shook my head, standing up. "No, Ethan. You love the memory of who I used to be. The woman who forgave, who begged, who waited. She's gone. I buried her the night you walked away." His voice broke into a whisper. "Then who are you now?" I smiled faintly. "Someone who finally knows she deserves better." I walked away before he could reply, and when I stepped outside into the night air, I saw Adrian waiting near the car, leaning casually against the door, as if he somehow knew I'd need him there. Without a word, he opened the passenger door for me. I got in. As we drove through the quiet streets, he glanced at me once and said, "You did the right thing." "I don't know," I admitted softly. "It didn't feel like victory, just an ending," he nodded. Sometimes endings are the only way to make room for something real. The following week, chaos consumed the Crawford empire. The board demanded Ethan's resignation. Investors pulled out. Celine disappeared from public view. And me. I was preparing to sign a new deal, one that would change everything. Vaughan Enterprises, Adrian's company, was merging with mine to form a new powerhouse. The same empire Ethan once used to look down on was now rising higher than his ever could. During the press conference, Adrian stood beside me, his hand brushing mine just slightly. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and yet all I felt was calm. When the signing was done, one reporter asked, "Ms. Reynolds, any message for your past associates at Crawford Group?" I smiled faintly and said, "Only this. Sometimes losing something false is the first step to finding what's real." The room fell silent. Adrian looked at me, pride glinting in his eyes. Later that evening, as we stood on the rooftop overlooking the city lights, he finally said it. "Lena," he began quietly, "I've seen you fight for love, for justice, for peace. When will you fight for yourself?" I turned to him, my breath catching slightly. "And what would that look like?" He smiled, stepping closer. "Maybe like this. Choosing someone who would never make you beg to be seen." The distance between us disappeared slowly, naturally. For once, there were no promises, no grand confessions, just silence, understanding, and the quiet beginning of something real. But as peace settled in my chest, I couldn't shake the feeling that the past wasn't quite done with me. Because somewhere out there, Celine was still watching, and she had nothing left to lose, and that made her dangerous. The calm never lasts, not in this life, not in any. Just when I thought the world had finally settled into a quiet rhythm, when my heart had stopped looking over its shoulder, I saw her again, Celine. It was a late autumn evening, golden leaves swirling across the pavement as I exited the Vaughan Enterprises building. Adrian had just dropped me off. After another long day of meetings, his smile still lingering in my mind. He had that way of making the world feel safe. But as I stepped toward my car, I noticed a figure leaning against a lamppost. Slender, elegant, and hauntingly familiar, she stepped into the light. Her red lips curled into that same venomous smile I used to fear. "Long time no see, Lena." For a moment, it felt like the ground shifted beneath me, but I straightened my shoulders and met her gaze. "Celine, I thought you'd disappeared for good." "Oh, I did," she said softly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "But like any good ghost, I come back when people start forgetting me." I sighed, keeping my tone even. "If you're here to play games again, I don't have the time, or the patience." Her smile didn't waver. "You really think you've won, don't you? That little press conference, that smug partnership with Adrian Vaughan. How adorable. You're building your little empire, while Ethan's crumbling. But here's the thing, Lena. I don't lose easily." She stepped closer, her perfume sharp, her tone sharpest. "I know what you did. You might not have published those articles, but someone did. Someone with insider access. Guess who everyone suspects?" I frowned. "Let me guess. Me?" Her grin widened. Bingo! I didn't need to destroy you, Celine. You did that yourself. She chuckled, the sound cold. And yet somehow I'm still standing. But Ethan, he's not. You should have seen him. Drunk, broken, begging for answers. You ruined him. For the first time, her words didn't pierce me. They rolled off like rain. He ruined himself. I said quietly. And you helped him. Her eyes flashed. You think Adrian's any different? You think his perfect world doesn't have cracks? I felt my pulse quicken. What are you talking about? Oh, you'll see, she whispered, stepping back with a glint of triumph. Men like him always hide something. It's just a matter of time before it breaks through. She turned away, her heels clicking against the pavement, like the ticking of a clock, counting down to something I didn't yet understand. I didn't chase her. Not this time. But her words lingered like smoke, long after she was gone. That night, I found myself staring at the ceiling, her taunts replaying in my mind. Men like him always hide something. No, Adrian wasn't like Ethan. He was honest, kind, grounded. Wasn't he? The next morning, I arrived at the office early. The building was quiet, the city still half asleep. I poured myself a cup of coffee, staring out the glass window. Then, my phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. How well do you really know Adrian Vaughn? Attached was a file. My hands trembled slightly as I clicked it open. It contained old photos. Grainy, but clear enough. Adrian, standing with none other than Ethan Crawford. Years ago, smiling, shaking hands, business partners. My breath caught. I sank into my chair, staring at the images, as disbelief tangled with confusion. Adrian had never mentioned knowing Ethan. Not once. Why? Was Celine right? Was there a truth buried beneath all his kindness? Before I could spiral deeper, my office door opened. Adrian stood there, holding 2 coffees like he always did. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said lightly. I forced a small smile. Maybe I have. He placed the coffee on my desk, noticing the tension in my face. What's wrong? I hesitated. Then I turned the screen toward him. His eyes darkened instantly. For the first time, I saw something unreadable cross his face. Something that wasn't calm. Where did you get these? He asked quietly. They were sent to me this morning. I said softly. You and Ethan. How long have you known each other? He exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. I was hoping this would never come up like this. Then tell me the truth, Adrian, I said, my voice steady, but shaking underneath. Please, don't make me find out the hard way. He looked at me, long, deep, and almost pained. Ethan and I were partners once, he finally said. Before you ever met him, before Crawford Group swallowed my father's company, I blinked. What? He nodded. He took everything from us, Lena. My father trusted him, and Ethan destroyed us in return. That's why I left the country, to rebuild from the ground up. When I came back, I found out what he did to you, and I swore I'd never let him do that to anyone again. Silence. I couldn't breathe for a moment. The air was heavy with things unsaid. So all this time, I whispered, you already knew my story. He nodded slowly. I did, but I didn't fall for your story, Lena. I fell for you. My heart ached. Not from pain, but from the strange realization that fate had been weaving our lives together. Long before we even met, Adrian stepped closer, his voice low. Celine's playing her final card. She'll twist the truth, make it look like I used you. You can believe her, or you can believe me. I looked into his eyes, the same steady gaze that had guided me through storms. There was no deceit there, only honesty born of scars. I nodded slowly. I believe you. His shoulders relaxed just slightly. He smiled, a small, grateful, exhausted smile. Good, he said softly, because I'm not losing you to ghosts from the past. Later that evening, as I was leaving, I received one last message from that same unknown number. Believe him all you want, but when I'm done, he'll fall harder than Ethan ever did. See. I stared at the screen, a chill running down my spine. For the first time in this second life, I realized something terrifying. The rebirth hadn't been just about redemption. It was about facing every buried truth I'd once ignored. And Celine wasn't done yet. I always thought pain came from loss, but I was wrong. True pain comes from doubt. That fragile moment when your heart doesn't know who to trust anymore. And that was where I found myself, standing between two worlds. The ghost of my past whispering lies, and the man in front of me fighting for truth. After Celine's message, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts spiraled back to her smirk, her confidence, her promise of destruction. She wasn't bluffing. She never did. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find the entire building buzzing with chaos. Reporters outside, flashing cameras, hushed voices echoing through the halls. When I reached my floor, my assistant ran up to me, panic on her face. "Ms. Reynolds, it's everywhere." "What is?" She handed me her tablet. On the screen flashed the headline that made my blood run cold. Adrian Vaughan's secret past, revenge, manipulation, and the woman at the center, Lena Reynolds. Beneath it were photos. Me and Adrian at business dinners, walking side by side, smiling. But the captions twisted everything. CEO's new romance built on vengeance. Adrian Vaughan, using former Crawford Mistress to dismantle rival empire. They made it look like I was his tool, that everything we'd built, our partnership, our bond, our moments, was just part of a cruel game. Celine had done it. She'd taken my truth and poisoned it. The board called an emergency meeting that afternoon. The tension in the air was suffocating. Whispers, judgmental glances, cameras flashing outside the conference room doors. When I walked in, Adrian was already there, calm, composed, but I could see the storm behind his eyes. One of the board members stood. "Mr. Vaughan, Ms. Reynolds, this scandal could destroy the merger before it finalizes. We need to know the truth." Adrian spoke first. "There's nothing between this woman and revenge. She built this company beside me, from the ground up. If anyone has doubts, they can ask themselves, who's been saving this business while others ran for cover?" His voice was strong, but I could feel his pulse racing. The tension in his clenched fists. Another man across the table sneered. "And your connection to Ethan Crawford? You hid that from us? Why?" Adrian's eyes met theirs. "Because I didn't want my father's mistakes to define my future." That was when the door slammed open, and she walked in, Celine Crawford. Her presence was magnetic, confident, composed, like she owned the chaos she'd unleashed. Her white suit gleamed under the harsh lights, her smile perfect, venomous. "I think I can clarify a few things," she said sweetly. "After all, we wouldn't want our dear Lena here to be misunderstood." Adrian rose instantly. "You're not supposed to be here." "Oh, I'm always where the truth needs to be told," she purred, tossing a folder onto the table. "Here, emails, proof that your so-called partnership started long before you claimed it did. Business leaks, strategy discussions, Crawford files. Seems like Miss Reynolds was feeding you information before you even left the company." Gasps, murmurs. The room turned toward me, eyes filled with accusation. "That's a lie," I said, my voice steady but trembling. "I didn't leak anything." Celine smirked. "Then tell them how you got Adrian's first deal approved. Or how you knew exactly what Crawford's weaknesses were. Don't pretend innocence, Lena. You and I both know you're just as good at manipulation as I am." My chest burned. "You destroyed me once, Celine. You won't do it again." She leaned closer, her voice soft but lethal. "Oh, sweetheart, I don't need to destroy you. You'll do it yourself. Once you realize that Adrian isn't as innocent as you think. Before I could respond, Adrian slammed his hand on the table. Enough, Celine. She turned to him, unflinching. You want her to know the truth? Fine, tell her. Tell her what you promised me years ago before you vanished with my family's secrets. The room froze. My gaze snapped to Adrian. What is she talking about? Celine's laugh was like glass breaking. You see, Lena, Adrian didn't just hate Ethan. He worked with me once to bring him down. But when the plan failed, he left. He left me to face the consequences, while pretending to be the noble savior now. I felt my stomach twist. Adrian's jaw tightened. That was before I knew who you really were, Celine. Before I knew what you were capable of. Oh, but you did know, she whispered, her eyes flickering toward me. You just didn't care. You both wanted the same thing, Ethan's downfall. The only difference is, I admit it, the room buzzed with whispers, cameras flashing outside the glass walls. I couldn't breathe. I stood up, my voice quiet but trembling. Adrian, is any of that true? He looked at me, his eyes full of conflict, pain, and a truth he could no longer hide. Yes, he said finally, but not like she says. I worked with her once, briefly, before I saw what she'd become, before I met you, before I realized revenge destroys everything it touches. And yet you kept it from me, I whispered. You knew she'd come for me again, and you still said nothing. He stepped forward. Because I wanted to protect you. I didn't want you dragged into this again. Celine smirked. And look how well that worked. The board members began muttering, the press snapping photos through the glass. I couldn't stay there another second. I turned and walked out, my heels echoing like thunder down the corridor, my chest tight, my heart shattering all over again. That night, I sat by the river, the same place where I once promised myself I'd never beg for love again. But this wasn't begging. This was breaking. I had trusted again, and the universe had tested that trust with fire. As the wind whispered across the water, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Adrian. I didn't lie about loving you, no matter what she says. I'd burn every bridge before I ever use you. Please, don't let her win. I stared at the words until they blurred. My heart wanted to believe him. My mind couldn't, because Celine wasn't wrong about one thing. Everyone hides something, and maybe, in this life, trust was the most dangerous gamble of all. But little did I know, that very night, Celine was preparing her final strike. One that wouldn't just destroy Adrian's reputation. It would threaten everything I had rebuilt, including my life. After months of avoiding him, I thought I had finally found peace. Ethan and I were growing closer. Not in the whirlwind kind of way I once had with Adrian, but in a quiet, healing rhythm. The kind that didn't demand proof or sacrifice. The kind that simply existed. Ethan respected my scars, both visible and invisible. He didn't pry or rush. He just stayed. Then came the night that changed everything. Adrian's company hosted a charity dinner, and Ethan's firm happened to be one of the sponsors. When he asked me to attend as his partner, I hesitated. The thought of seeing Adrian again, in a setting full of pretense and flashing lights, made my stomach twist. But Ethan just smiled and said gently, "You don't have to prove anything to him, Aria. You've already won by choosing yourself." Those words, they grounded me. So, I agreed. The evening glowed with chandeliers, laughter, and the subtle hum of wealth. As we entered, all heads turned. My red silk gown shimmered with every step I took, and Ethan's hand around mine was steady, grounding. I caught glimpses of whispers. Those who remembered the scandal, the rumors, the twisted story Adrian's PR team had spun about me years ago. Then I saw him, Adrian. He stood near the stage, perfectly polished in a black suit, his eyes scanning the crowd, until they landed on me. His expression froze, I saw something flicker across his face. Disbelief, longing, guilt. Maybe all three. Beside him stood Serafina, his sister. She wore a smug smile, her hand hooked around his arm like she was staking her claim. I felt an odd sense of detachment, as if I was watching someone else's past unfold. Aria. Adrian's voice was low but firm when he finally approached. You look different. I turned slightly, giving him a polite smile. It's cold peace, Adrian. You should try it sometime. Ethan's hand found the small of my back. Protective, but never possessive. Adrian noticed. His jaw tightened. So he's the reason you disappeared. I tilted my head. No, you are the reason I disappeared. He's the reason I didn't stay lost. For a moment, silence fell between us. Around us, people continued to laugh and toast, oblivious to the emotional storm brewing in the corner of that glittering hall. Serafina stepped closer, her voice dripping with disdain. Still the same, Aria. Always pretending to be noble while chasing men above your league. Ethan's soft chuckle cut through her words. Funny, she's the only one here who doesn't need to pretend. Serafina's face reddened. Adrian shot him a glare but said nothing. It was clear. The power dynamic had shifted. Later that night, the charity auction began. Ironically, one of the items up for bid was a painting I had done during my early art days. One Adrian had once dismissed as too emotional, too personal. When the auctioneer introduced it, I felt my chest tighten. I didn't even know how it resurfaced. But before I could process it, Adrian raised his paddle. $50,000. The crowd murmured. Then Ethan raised his paddle. $100,000. Adrian's eyes snapped toward him, but Ethan didn't flinch. I'll keep it, he said softly to me, as a reminder that beauty deserves appreciation, not dismissal. My eyes stung, not from embarrassment, but from the realization of how different love felt when it was genuine. After the event, Adrian cornered me in the hallway near the exit. Aria, can we talk? Just once. Without the crowd, without him. I sighed. Against my better judgment, I nodded. Ethan stayed behind, giving me a reassuring look. We stepped outside, where the cool night air felt like truth itself. Adrian's mask cracked. I was wrong, he began. About everything. You, Serafina. She lied. She was never my sister. It was a scheme. A manipulation from my mother to hide the scandal of her illegitimate child. I didn't know until recently. I swear at Aria. His words hit me like lightning. I stared at him speechless. So, all those years, all that pain, was built on a lie. He nodded, tears glinting in his eyes. I thought I was protecting her, protecting the family name, but I destroyed the only person who truly loved me. My breath shook, and for a split second, I felt the ghost of the love I once had for him tug at my heart. But then I remembered the nights I cried alone, the days I doubted my worth, and the way he looked at me like I was a mistake. I used to think if I could hear you say those words, I'd forgive you, I whispered. But now, I don't need your confession to heal. I already have. Adrian stepped closer, desperation bleeding from his voice. Aria, please, don't marry him. Don't walk away like this. I smiled sadly. I'm not walking away, Adrian. You just stayed too long where I already left. And with that, I turned, leaving him standing under the cold glow of the streetlights, his regret echoing in silence. As I walked back inside, Ethan met me halfway. He didn't ask what happened. He simply opened his arms, and I melted into them. Not out of weakness, but out of release. That night, I realized something powerful. Closure doesn't come from the person who broke you. It comes from choosing not to let them break you again. The night after the charity dinner, I couldn't sleep. Not because of Adrian's confession, but because of how unmoved I felt. The man who once held my world in his hands had shattered it. And now his words, his tears, his pleas, they no longer held power over me. For years, I imagined closure as some grand emotional scene. Him begging, me forgiving, both of us finally at peace. But reality was quieter. Closure was walking away and realizing my heart didn't race anymore. Days turned into weeks, and life began to settle into something beautiful and simple. Ethan and I spent our mornings together in our small art cafe, painting while customers sipped coffee and watched street performers through the window. Sometimes he'd sneak glances at me, and when I caught him, he'd just grin like I was the best thing that ever happened to him. And maybe, finally, I believed I could be someone's best thing. But fate, as always, had one more turn left for Adrian. One morning, as I was sorting through invoices at the cafe, a familiar name appeared in the headlines, flashing across a customer's tablet. CEO Adrian Black under investigation for corporate fraud and manipulation. My hands froze. I read the article quietly, heart steady. His company had been caught falsifying financial statements, something Serafina's family had orchestrated years ago, using his trust and name. They'd drained his reputation, his company, and left him to take the fall. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. He'd built his empire on deception, and now it was crumbling under the same lies. Later that evening, as I locked up the cafe, I saw a shadow standing near the alleyway. My breath caught. It was Adrian. He looked nothing like the man I once knew. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow, his confidence replaced by exhaustion. "Aria," his voice cracked. "They took everything. The company, the money, even the house. She's gone, Serafina. She left when the news broke." I said nothing. He took a hesitant step forward. "I don't expect forgiveness. I needed to see you. To see if you're real, or if I'm just dreaming of the only thing I didn't destroy." I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of everything between us. "I am real, Adrian, but the woman you remember isn't." He looked confused. "She died the day you made her your mistress," I said softly. "The woman standing in front of you now, she's someone new, someone who doesn't need you to see her anymore." Tears filled his eyes. "He's a lucky man, Arya. Don't make the same mistake I did." I smiled faintly. "He won't let me." He nodded, then turned away, walking down the street until his figure disappeared into the city's blur. I didn't chase after him this time. There was no need to. The next morning, Ethan noticed my quietness and asked gently, "You saw him, didn't you?" I nodded. "He's lost everything." Ethan was silent for a moment, then said, "Sometimes losing everything is the only way people realize what mattered most." I looked up at him, smiling faintly. And sometimes it's the only way we realize we never needed them in the first place. We spent that afternoon painting side by side. The sunlight poured through the cafe windows, glinting off our brushes. My canvas slowly turned into a portrait, not of Adrian or the past, but of a sunrise. Because that's what this felt like. A new beginning. A few days later, Ethan surprised me. The cafe was closed early. Candles flickered on every table, and he stood in the center with a small velvet box. "Arya," he said softly, voice trembling, but sure. "You once told me you thought love meant losing yourself. I want to spend my life proving that love can mean finding yourself." Tears blurred my vision. "Ethan." He took a step closer, opening the box to reveal a simple silver ring. "Will you marry me, not because you need me, but because you want to build something new, together?" My voice cracked as I whispered, "Yes." As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt peace, not the fleeting kind, but the deep, quiet kind that comes after years of storms. That night, as we stood on the rooftop watching the stars, I thought of Adrian, alone, perhaps finally understanding the weight of what he'd done. And I realized, Not every love story is meant to end with reunion. Some are meant to end with redemption. Mine just happened to begin again. The sun rose slowly over the city, painting the skyline in shades of gold and rose. It felt different this morning. Not the chaotic energy of 1,000 deadlines or scandals, but something quiet, gentle, and full of possibility. I stood on the balcony of our new apartment, the soft wind tugging at my hair. Beside me, Ethan sipped his coffee, his hand brushing mine in a gesture so small, yet so grounding. "Beautiful morning," he said softly. I nodded, eyes scanning the horizon. "It feels like we finally earned it," he smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The kind of smile that spoke of patience, trust, and enduring love. We did. All of it. The past, the pain, the chaos. It led us here. I turned to him, and for the first time in years, I felt entirely safe. Not because the world was perfect, but because I was finally exactly where I was meant to be. Life with Ethan settled into rhythms I hadn't known I'd missed. We opened our little art cafe together, hosting workshops, gallery nights, and community events. Every day was ordinary in the most extraordinary way. Mornings filled with laughter, afternoons painted with colors, evenings wrapped in quiet conversations. The past still lingered in small ways, whispers of the lives we'd lived, the mistakes we'd made, and the people we'd lost. Adrian's name rarely came up, and when it did, it was with a sense of closure rather than pain. I'd forgiven him, not for his sake, but for mine. Forgiveness wasn't about letting him off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the weight of resentment. Then came the day of our engagement party. Friends, family, and colleagues gathered to celebrate a love that had been fought for and earned. I wore a simple ivory dress, my hair loosely pinned, and for the first time, I felt truly radiant. Not because of admiration, but because of peace. Ethan took my hand, leading me to the center of the room. "Aria," he began, his voice steady, yet full of emotion. "You've been my compass, my calm in every storm, and my heart's truest companion. I promise to stand by you, not because I need you, but because I want to grow with you, laugh with you, and build a life that reflects the love we've fought to find." Tears pricked my eyes. I took a deep breath. "Ethan, you've given me something I didn't know I deserved. Not perfection, not grandeur, but a love that feels like home. I promise to walk beside you, through storms or calm, laughter or tears, for as long as we breathe." The room erupted in applause. Friends cheered. Cameras flashed. And in that moment, everything felt complete. Later that evening, as the party settled into quiet conversations, a shadow fell across the balcony doorway. I looked up, expecting the city lights to cast a trick of the shadows. But there he was, Adrian. He stood there alone, hands in his pockets, his expression calm, yet tinged with regret. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. "I didn't want to intrude," he said softly. "I just wanted to see you happy. That's all I ever wanted." Even when I didn't know how to give it, I nodded, my heart steady. "I am, truly. And you'll find your way too. Maybe not with me, but somewhere. You'll find your peace." He exhaled, a small relieved smile breaking through his sorrow. "Thank you, Aria. I've carried the weight of my mistakes for far too long. Seeing you here, it's enough." And with that, he turned, disappearing into the night. The city lights reflected in the tears that I didn't bother hiding. Not from joy, not from sorrow, but from the profound weight of finality. Ethan slipped his hand into mine, grounding me once more. "Everything okay?" I nodded, resting my head against his shoulder. "Better than okay. Perfect." The night air carried a gentle breeze, sweeping away the remnants of the past. Lies, betrayal, and pain. All that remained was love. Honest and unshakable, and the promise of a life rebuilt from the ashes of what once was. We stood there together, hand in hand, watching the first stars appear above the city. I realized something profound. Life wasn't about the people who left, the betrayals endured, or the storms weathered. It was about finding the strength to step into the light, choosing love over fear, and embracing a future that had always been waiting for us. And as the city hummed beneath us, I whispered softly, "This is the beginning, not the end." Ethan smiled, pressing his lips to my temple. The beginning of everything we deserve, and for the first time I believed it. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment love, so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, spread love.